Hello everybody, it's Mr. Q again. What's up? Hope you guys are staying safe and having fun. Today, I will begin part 2 of my travel series. Remember, last time we talked about where in the world do you want to go? And so after you decide that, then one of the next best things you should do is think about money. Because it's not very easy to travel if you don't have money, right? So we need to think about, what do you need to spend money on while you're traveling? That's what we're going to be talking about today. The cost of traveling. But the cost of traveling is kind of a bigger topic. So today will be part 1 of 2 that talks about the cost. And today we're going to be focusing on transportation and accommodation. Let's get started. When talking about the cost of traveling, I recommend using a spreadsheet, like Excel or something, to keep track of the different categories of expenses and to keep track of the specific expenses that you might have. Now, I know that there is always an option to go maybe through a travel agent and to travel on a tour where basically you pay a big sum of money and then somebody organizes the whole trip for you, right? Everything from the flight to accommodations, to your food, to what you see and how long you see it and everything. So do some research, because you can get some pretty good prices on some of those tours. You do need to be careful though, because sometimes those tours require you to spend extra money going shopping and stuff. So tours can be good. You just need to pay attention and make sure that the time frames on the tours are something that are acceptable to you, because many tours are very fast. They see a lot of things, which is cool, but you don't get to spend much time at each of those things. That's not cool. So it just depends. Check and see if a tour is right for you. Maybe it will be. And if it is, well, I guess that helps simplify your budget. Your budget is how much you're going to spend on your trip. So you'll only need the cost of the tour and then some extra spending money just in case. That's pretty simple. Now, if you want to have a little bit more control over your expenses, over your time, over where you stay and what you eat, then you might not want to take a tour. And that's what we're going to focus on today, is not for those of you taking tours, but those of you who want a little bit more control over what you're spending your money on and what you're spending your time on. So we're going to talk some more about that shortly.
Here's a sample of the spreadsheet that I've used in the past.
So probably your most important expenses are things you spend money on. Your most important expense is going to probably be your transportation, right? Because if you can't get there, then you're not going anywhere, right? So you gotta pay for getting to someplace. So transportation is one of the most important things that you're going to be spending your money on. And people sometimes don't realize the different aspects of transportation. Transportation starts when you leave your house. So how do you get back and forth to your airport, right? You need to include that in the cost. You can take public transportation, a taxi. How are you getting to the airport? Is a friend taking you? It's okay. Once you have that, then you can think about how are you going to travel? Will you be taking a plane, a train, a bus? Are you going to drive your own car? These are all things you need to think about. And it partially depends on where you're going. Because if you're in America and you want to go to China, obviously you can't drive there. You have to take a plane, right? But if you're in China and you want to go to Russia, you can take a train, you could drive. There's a lot of different ways to get from those two places, right? The other thing you need to think about is how far away is the destination from where you are. So it's not so bad to drive if it's just going to be a few hundred miles maybe, but remember, miles, and if your speed limit is 70 miles per hour and you're going a few hundred miles, let's say you want to go 280 miles away, then that means you're going to be driving for 4 hours at least, right? So you still have to budget for the gas for your car if you're driving, in addition to the time it takes you to drive there. But if it's pretty far away, 1,000 miles or more, you probably want to take a train or fly there even. It kind of depends on how fast you want to get there. I know many countries in the world have high-speed trains. Still, it's not as fast as flying, but it can be a little bit more convenient. And it can be a little bit cheaper as well. So, you just have to decide, based on where you're going, how do you want to get there? And once again, in the last video, we talked about applications and websites you can use, right? So same thing with deciding how to travel. There are websites like trip.com and Expedia, or you can go directly to the website. You can go to American Airlines or Air China, whatever, doesn't matter. And you can figure out how much it would cost. I recommend doing some comparison shopping. That means you check multiple sites and see what different sites tell you could be the price. And then you can go with the best price or the one with the best options. Now, we talked about getting back and forth to your airport that you're leaving from. We talked about the airport that you need to take your plane from. But don't forget, transportation also includes getting around the city where you arrive. So how do you get around the city or the countryside of where you have arrived? You need to include that in the cost of your transportation. So do you plan on taking public buses or tuk-tuks? Many Asian countries have little like carts that usually they have like 3 wheels and a driver in the front. You can fit 2 people in the back usually. You can take taxi. You can probably even rent a motorcycle if you want in some places, or rent a car when you get there. But remember, all of this adds into the cost of your transportation. And don't forget that when you're paying for your flight, read this small print, because some airlines include baggage and some don't. So usually, generally speaking, most airlines will allow you to carry on with you onto the plane a small bag. Usually you can say, if the bag is the size of your upper torso, no problem. You can carry that on. It's small enough and will be light enough. If it's bigger than that, you might not be allowed to carry that on, and you might have to check that bag. So some airlines will charge you more to carry on extra items, and they will oftentimes charge you to check bags. Some flights automatically have bags included, especially if you're flying internationally between countries. But pay attention. You might have to pay for baggage extra. All right?
Because there are so many different websites and apps that you can check, you should do some comparison shopping. Check and see which site or app has the best price for your travel.
All right. You've arrived at your destination city for your vacation. Now, this brings us to our next most important expense, and that involves accommodation. What's an accommodation? Where you're going to stay, right? Unless you're going to be there only for a couple of hours, you need to stay someplace, whether that be a hotel or a hostel or your friends and family, it doesn't matter. But where are you going to stay? And most people, this is an important expense because it can vary. There's so many different places that you can stay when you travel. You can stay places that aren't very expensive or don't cost you anything, like your friends and family. Or places that are not very expensive, like a hostel, but you might have to share a room and you might have to share a bathroom in a hostel. So if you want privacy, a hostel might not be for you, but don't rule them out because sometimes hostels have private rooms. And sometimes if you're traveling with a couple of people or like you and your partner, you could stay in the same room and that could cost you the same or even less sometimes instead of renting 2 shared beds. So pay attention to that. There might be an option to have a private room in a hostel. But if you're one of those people that has to have your own room and your own bathroom, well then you probably want to stay in some sort of hotel. And that's okay too. There's not a problem. The question I would ask you to ask yourself is, how much contact do you want to have with your fellow travelers? When you stay in a hotel, you tend not to have as much contact with fellow travelers. If you're staying in a hostel, you tend to have a much higher degree of contact. And you might even hook up with those guys and go to see some interesting things together. So a hostel can be good for that. Of course, if you're with friends and family, they're probably going to show you around anyways. So you've got that going for you, in addition to being made probably a free place to stay. So when you're looking at where you're going to stay, though, you need to also think about what is included in your hotel room. Do they have a pool at the hotel? Do they include a breakfast for free? Some places do. Do they have a restaurant at your hotel? Many hotels do have restaurants. It may not be free to eat there, but they have a restaurant. And sometimes if you've had a long day, it might just be nice to kick back at the hotel and eat in their restaurant and not have to worry about finding a place to eat, right? So if they have a restaurant located on the premises, then that would be great to help you out. Another important thing to think about is, does the hotel have a airport shuttle? So if you're flying in to that city, many hotels, especially high-end or more expensive hotels, have an airport shuttle that will drive you back and forth from the airport to the hotel. It might cost a little bit extra for that service, but many times it's included. So it doesn't hurt to ask and try to look and see if it's included. That way you don't have to find a taxi or figure out your way to the hotel. They just come and get you. Back and forth, done. And that can be quite nice. So you might want to make sure how much money you feel like you want to spend on your accommodations, because you don't want to pick a place that's too expensive for you. Even though it might be super nice, it might be super expensive as well. So you need to make sure that your budget includes enough money for your hotel for however long you're going to stay there. Maybe it would be $100 a night, $100 a night, or 700 RMB a night. It's up to you. So be thinking about that, on what level of comfort you want your accommodation to be.
Just like planning your transportation, there are many websites and apps that can help you plan for your accommodation. And once again, do some comparison shopping.
Let's review what we talked about today. Today we talked about the fact that you could take a tour, and tours are good because they plan everything and they have the majority of your expenses bundled in to it, so that you pay one price and then they pay for most everything else that you do. Yeah, you'll need some extra money for souvenirs and other things maybe, but for snacks. But for the most part, if you're taking a tour, that's pretty good. But you just have to pay attention. Sometimes those tours are too fast. Sometimes they don't go to the places that you actually want to go to. And sometimes they make you do things that you don't necessarily want to do. So today I focused on transportation, getting back and forth to the airport. You need to budget for that. How you're traveling. You taking the plane, train, bus, you driving, right? You still, doesn't matter how you're getting to wherever you're going, you got to pay to get there somehow, right? And you can use sites, websites, and apps to help you figure out how much it'll cost you. You can use sites like Trip.com or Expedia, or go directly to the site. And you can, like AirAsia or American Airlines, whatever, it doesn't matter. And you got to figure out what type of things are you going to do when you're in that destination city. Are you going to need transportation? Are you going to try to take the public bus, taxis, tuk-tuks? How are you going to get around? And one interesting thing though is sometimes your accommodation could have an airport shuttle, which means they have transportation back and forth from their place to the airport, which is nice. And that's something that you might want to consider when thinking about your accommodation, right? Where are you going to stay? What other things do you need to think about? Do you want a pool? Do you want a private room? If it's okay, if you share a room and share a bathroom, then you can save some money. Staying with friends and family, of course, is always great because that's going to be free. And then you'll have some local people to show you around. Staying in a hotel is nice because you have all the privacy you want. So it just depends on how much privacy you want, how much money you want to spend to stay. Are you going to be busy all day and basically you're just using your room to sleep anyways, and you're not going to spend much time in the room? Then maybe you want to spend a little less money on that. So these are all things that you need to think about when planning your budget for your trip. So today, your homework is to think about your last trip that you went on, or on the trip that I asked you to think about in the last video. And I want you to think about the transportation involved. I want you to think about all the things that you cared about at your hotel or wherever you stayed. And I want you to write those things down, right? So, what were the transportation costs, or what would the transportation costs be for the trip that you just thought about in the last video? And think about how much it might cost to stay someplace, either from the last trip you took or from the vacation I had you thinking about on the last video. All right? Write down those 10 things, then share them with your friends and classmates. All right, guys, that's it for me today. Be looking forward to part 2 of this cost video, and we'll finish up talking about things that you need to be thinking about in regards to your cost. All right, see you next time.